Welcome to my channel, The Historic State. In the crucible of combat, every soldier, every specialist is expected to be a weapon. To be hardened, precise, lethal. The elite Navy SEALs are the apex predators of this world, men of iron will and unmatched skill. But what happens when the most fearsome warriors on Earth find themselves outmatched, cornered, facing an enemy whose beliefs run deeper than bullets? Today, we tell the astonishing story of a seemingly routine mission gone catastrophically wrong, deep in the treacherous mountains of a forgotten land. A SEAL team, trapped and outnumbered, was staring death in the face. Their only hope lay not with their weapons, but with the quiet, ordinary female translator they had barely tolerated. A woman they had deemed soft, insignificant. They had laughed at her quiet demeanor, ignored her profound knowledge. But when she spoke words from an ancient, forgotten tongue, the most brutal enemy in front of them didn't just surrender. They knelt in terror, believing they had faced a living ghost. NNTHE mission was a textbook, Special Operations Directive. Infiltrate, identify, extract. Deep within the forbidding mountain range of Qazmir, a hostile region untouched by modern conflict, a rogue militant group had established a crude but critical communications hub. SEAL Team 6, led by the legendary Chief Petty Officer Hammer Riley, was tasked with its neutralization. Hammer was a man carved from granite, a veteran of countless black ops, a living legend. His team reflected his intensity. Among them, a stark contrast, was Dr. Lena Petrova. Officially, she was their embedded linguist, brought in for her expertise in obscure regional dialects. In reality, to Hammer and his men, she was a necessary inconvenience. Soft-spoken, academically inclined, seemingly out of place amidst their hardened masculinity. From the outset, Lena was an outsider. During briefings, when she tried to explain the deep cultural and historical nuances of the Qazmiri people, the militant group's lineage, their ancient tribal affiliations, their almost mythical reverence for their mountain deities, Hammer would cut her off with a gruff, dismissive wave. "Just tell them what we say, Doc. Keep it simple. We don't need a history lesson, we need translations." The other SEALs would exchange smirks, seeing her as a civilian academic slumming it in a war zone, her knowledge deemed irrelevant to their world of combat. Lena, used to being underestimated, would simply nod, her face impassive, her sharp mind absorbing every detail, every sound, every whisper of the wind through these ancient mountains. She knew these lands in a way they never could. The mission went sideways in an instant. As they approached the target, the mountains erupted. An ambush. Not just a small patrol, but a well-coordinated, overwhelming force of militants, far larger than intelligence had suggested. The SEALs, caught in a narrow canyon, were pinned down, outnumbered, and outmaneuvered. Grenades exploded. Automatic rifle fire tore through the air, and guttural shouts in an unfamiliar dialect echoed from the cliff faces above. Hammer, a warrior born, fought with every ounce of his legendary skill, barking orders, directing fire. But even he knew this was a losing battle. They were trapped, their escape routes cut off. Death, cold and unforgiving, was closing in. Lena, caught in the crossfire, huddled low, but her eyes, despite the terror, were sharp, observing the enemy, listening to their shouts, a strange understanding dawning in her mind. "Nand, we're almost out of ammo," a SEAL shouted over the din. Another, bleeding heavily from a chest wound, collapsed. Hammer gritted his teeth, his face grim. His options were gone. This was it. A last stand against impossible odds. He caught Lena's eye. Her face streaked with dirt and blood, but her expression holding a strange, almost ethereal focus amidst the chaos. "Any last words, Doc?" he snarled, half in despair, half in contempt for her perceived uselessness in this dire moment. Lena didn't flinch. Instead, she slowly shook her head, her gaze fixed beyond him, towards the enemy. On. In that exact moment, as if a switch had been flipped, Lena moved. With a sudden, calm resolve that defied the hellish environment, she stood up amidst the furious gunfire. "Get down, you idiot!" Hammer roared, thinking she was surrendering or had finally lost her mind. She ignored him completely. She slowly, deliberately raised her hands, not in a gesture of surrender, but in a precise, almost ceremonial manner. And then, she spoke. Her voice, usually quiet and unassuming, now resonated with a strange, deep, almost unearthly power. She spoke in a language no one present had ever heard, a language of guttural sounds, sharp clicks, and elongated echoing syllables. The effect on the enemy was instantaneous and terrifying. The firing from the militants above ceased abruptly. Their guttural shouts turned into confused whispers. Then, as Lena continued to speak, her voice weaving complex, resonant phrases, confusion turned to fear. And fear turned to absolute, abject terror. Militants, hardened by years of brutal warfare, dropped their weapons as if burned. Some fell to their knees, prostrating themselves in the dusty canyon, their faces contorted in a mixture of reverence, dread, and superstitious horror. They were no longer fighting, they were worshiping, or perhaps begging for mercy from something far older, far more powerful than any modern soldier. Silence, profound and chilling, descended upon the canyon, broken only by Lena's ancient, resonant words. And Lena finished speaking, her voice echoing in the sudden, eerie silence. She slowly lowered her hands, her gaze sweeping over the kneeling militants, an expression of cold, weary authority on her face. She then turned her eyes to Hammer, who was staring at her, frozen, his face a mask of utter disbelief and shock. The militants remained on their knees, not daring to move, their weapons scattered around them, completely defeated not by bullets but by words. Slowly, carefully, one of the militant leaders, an older, more weathered man, rose from his knees. He picked up a white cloth from the ground, avoiding eye contact with Lena, and held it aloft in a clear sign of surrender. He then made a sweeping gesture to his men, and in stunned, terrified silence, the entire militant force retreated, melting back into the mountains from which they had appeared. The SEALs watched them go, utterly bewildered, their weapons still clutched in their hands, their minds struggling to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Back at the forward operating base, the aftermath was a whirlwind of debriefings and bewildered questions. Hammer cornered Lena in a private room, his voice low, his face a mix of awe and lingering disbelief. "What was that, Doc?" he demanded. "What in God's name did you say out there? You scared them half to death." Lena looked at him, her expression calm, weary, but holding a hint of deep, ancient knowledge. "I spoke their oldest dialect, Chief," she explained quietly. "A language almost forgotten, passed down through generations of tribal lore reserved for rituals and legends. The language of their mountain gods. The language of their ancient curses. To them, I wasn't just a translator. I was a spirit. A vengeful spirit of the mountain itself, risen to protect the land." Hammer stared at her, the full weight of his arrogance, his dismissal of her, crashing down upon him. He had seen her as weak, irrelevant. But she had been the most powerful weapon of all, wielding not bullets, but belief, fear, and the profound, terrifying power of ancient words. He gave her a subtle, almost imperceptible nod of respect, a quiet apology in his eyes for every dismissive glance, every sarcastic remark. He had misjudged her completely. NNDR. Lena Petrova continued her work, her quiet demeanor unchanged. But no SEAL ever looked at her the same way again. She was no longer just a translator. She was the guardian of ancient knowledge, the voice that could command mountains and bring hardened warriors to their knees. She had proven that true strength isn't always loud or violent. Sometimes, it is found in the forgotten whispers of the past, in the quiet specialist who understands that the most formidable weapons are not always made of steel, but of spiritin. Thank you for watching The Historic State. If this incredible story of hidden power, shattered arrogance, and the terrifying force of forgotten words left you spellbound, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because here, we believe that the deepest truths and the greatest strengths are often found where we least expect them.